So we'll get started. Welcome to our talk on getting started to contributing to Puppet and Factor. I'd like to go over our goals for this talk. We want to get you excited about contributing to Puppet because contributing is really cool. We love it when we have people help out with our software, and it can really help you out too. We want to show you that contributing is not something to be scared of. It can look really intimidating, but we were interns who had no experience coming in, and we started contributing in like just a couple weeks, or actually right away. So we want to show you that contributing is not as hard as it looks. We also want to give you the tools you need to get started with contributing and suggest some good ways to get started. So who are we? I'm Teska. I'm a student at Portland State University, and I'm studying computer science. I interned at Puppet Labs over the summer, and I worked on the Puppet Enterprise team.
I'm Haley.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm currently a junior at the University of Portland. I'm studying electrical engineering and computer science. I was a dev intern on the platform team this summer and had zero Puppet and open source experience when I started, as well as not a lot of programming experience.
I also had no experience.
Your first job ever, right?
Yeah, ever.
I also had no experience with open source or Puppet.
I'm Ruth. I graduated from Reed College, which is a very small school in Portland, in May with a degree in linguistics. And I have been programming for about a year, kind of took a couple classes. But like Teska and Haley, I had no experience with open source projects. I barely knew what Puppet or Factor were. So.
Okay, so that's us. We're making a couple assumptions about you guys coming in here. We're guessing that you're familiar with Puppet and Factor / what they do. We're hoping that you've used them a little bit. If not, that's okay. We certainly hadn't. We're guessing that you have never contributed before and that you don't have a lot of experience or no experience contributing to open source projects.
So why contribute? One of the things that makes Puppet awesome is that it's open source. And I don't know if anyone went to James's talk this morning, but Puppet couldn't exist without having contributions from community members. It's awesome to have such a big community around Puppet. I think we're at like 5,000 community members on the Puppet users list, and we'd love to see more of those people getting involved, contributing code to Puppet as well. And we've got thousands of outstanding bugs and features that we still want, and we don't have the time or the expertise with a lot of these platforms to go and be able to do all of this stuff. So you guys can contribute amazing things and make Puppet so much better.
So that's why we want you to contribute, but there's also reasons why you guys want to contribute to Puppet. For one, let's say that there's a bug that you've run into personally and you want to see it fixed, but it's not, nobody's getting around to it, or you want to see it fixed right away. Well, you can go find the ticket for it, start working on it, and contribute the code yourself and have it done like really quickly. Also, if there's a feature that you want to see added, you can create a ticket, and then once it's approved by someone at Puppet, you can start working on it. So if it's something that you're looking for that's personal to you, that you would really like to see in Puppet, you can go make it. You don't have to wait for somebody to go around and do it.
In addition, people will really be excited about it and really appreciate you. So I know the first thing that I contributed to Puppet was some new facts, and so our IRC channel, the Puppet Dev on Freenode, has a GitHub bot that comes in every time any code is merged to our open source products. And so I had contributed something for Dragonfly BSD support for a fact. And someone saw that in IRC and gave me some karma for it. So it was really awesome to see other people appreciating the work that I did.
It's also pretty cool to just get your code out there and have it looked at people that you don't know. I remember my second day of interning, I came home and I was exhausted and I couldn't remember all this stuff about Git and everything, and I just wanted to go to bed. And I checked my email and saw that someone had commented on my first ever bug fix pull request, and I was so stoked. It wasn't even anyone at the company, it was a community member. And it was really exciting to feel like I wrote real code and a real person looked at it. And it's a really great feeling.
And for me, my first ticket that I worked on was a bug for Puppet Enterprise, and I took a look at it, I started working on it, and eventually I got it committed and merged into Puppet Enterprise. And then I didn't really realize until later that, wait, I just made a change to Puppet Enterprise, and now a bunch of people are going to go use it, and it's in this release that came out. So it was really cool for me to think, whoa, that tiny change I made, now it's in this code that people are buying and using, and it's really cool to see that. So we have a document that we have online about contributing, and this is like a good overview to help you get started. And on a side note, this was brought out as a great example of a contributing doc, and GitHub commented on it and said it's awesome. So I hope you guys find that this is useful, and Haley worked on that, so it's cool to see that. So while you guys are handing those out, I'd like to go into some basics about getting started up so that you can start contributing.
So if you've used Puppet a lot, you may have encountered some bugs, in which case you may have gone and filed them on Redmine, which is our ticketing system. We use this to track everything that's going on with Puppet. And so anything that's worked on should have a number associated with it, as well as an issue name. And so the first thing that you want to do when you start contributing, you said, okay, I want to do this, it's awesome, you should make a Redmine account. Very easy. We also need you to sign the CLA, which is the Contributor License Agreement. We can't merge your code in unless you sign this. For most people, it's not a problem to sign it. For some, there's might be issues with intellectual property with your company. If you do have any concerns about that, reach out to us, and we will kind of help you figure that out. I'm not a lawyer, I don't know any legal stuff, but I think this is not about kind of reassigning copyright or any of your rights, it's about re-licensing it, but again, we are not the ones who are experts on that.
Just ping us on IRC if you have any questions about that.
Okay, so the first step in fixing a bug or adding a feature is figuring out what you want to do. And it's really important to have the right motivation here. We have a lot of community members that want to fix code just because it's fun. It's a fun challenge. Hacking on code is great. But there are also a lot of other ways you can get really motivated to work on something. One thing that I think is great is if you pick something that affects you personally, a bug that's been driving you nuts or a feature that you'd really like to see, and make sure you pick something that's within your skill set. Don't pick something too hard because you'll get frustrated and might not want to continue. And Eric Sorensen has made this lovely Redmine query, links puppetlabs.com, patches welcome, of Redmine tickets that are a good starting point. And another great recommendation that is near and dear to my heart is that you should pick something that you have personal expertise about. One of my major headaches in my first couple weeks as an intern was trying to keep track of a million different operating systems and all the slight differences between them. And one of the things I ended up doing was spending 2 days setting up a Fun2 VM, which involved partitioning all the memory myself and it not working and trying again and starting over. So if you're the guy on Fun2, you should help us out and tell us how things are working on Fun2, submit a patch, and if you love BSD, free BSD, OpenBSD, Dragonfly BSD, then that's also a really awesome thing that we don't have a lot of support for but would like to. Also, the Redmine search is a little bit questionable, so just a quick trick. Google is a much better way to see if you can find the ticket you're looking for. Just sites projects.puppetlabs.com and then some kind of keywords for the thing you're looking for. And if you can't find the ticket for what you want to work on, you're welcome to create one yourself. Make sure you wait for a ticket accepted by someone at Puppet, and then you can assign it to yourself and get started.
Cool, so once you've got a ticket to work on, and that could be like a feature or a bug that you're trying to fix, you'll want to get started with GitHub. Git, in case you're not familiar with Git, it's a version control system. It basically lets you manage multiple versions of code without having multiple folders, name various things for when you were last working on it. So we use GitHub to host the repositories for our code. So if you want to start working on actual code, you have to have a GitHub account. So you'll create an account on GitHub and you'll fork the repository for your project. You can find the Factor repository or the Puppet repository there. We recommend that you start with Factor, and we'll go more into that later. But you'll fork the repository. And then once you've forked it, you'll want to clone the fork and make sure that you're cloning your fork of the project and not the original repository, because that defeats the purpose. You'll also want to create a development branch, and what the branch does is it lets you work on the specific bug that you're trying to fix, and it helps you keep your code separated so that if you're working on multiple bug fixes, then you can separate them into multiple branches. As far as naming, you'll want to include the ticket number on Redmine and a brief message about what it is that you're trying to do, which would be just a sample commit message. Sometimes I just use the title of the ticket because that's usually pretty self-explanatory. So you've got your code base cloned and you've got a branch for it. Now it's time to start working on the bug you're trying to fix. So we use Ruby for both Puppet and Factor. And if you're not familiar with Ruby, it's an object-oriented language, and its syntax is a bit like Perl. So if you have experience with Perl, then that might be really intuitive. Otherwise, I had experience with Java, and it wasn't too hard to switch over to Ruby. We support versions 1.8.7 and 1.9.3. And you can install the necessary gems for Puppet and Factor with the bundle install. Just make sure that you have Mocha version 0.10.5, and this will save you a lot of headache if you make sure you have that version.
What's Mocha?
It's a gem that you need to run Rspec tests. If you don't have 0.10.5, the Rspec tests will all fail. So.
And then people freak out, they start posting messages, yeah.
Is there any, so Mocha 10.5 is no longer the latest version. Are you guys going to upgrade your tests so that we can use a real version of Mocha?
It's being worked on. There have been, especially, I don't know if you guys have seen Ashley Penny in the community, but he submitted a lot of patches to support the new version of Mocha, so we're making progress.
So I believe the later versions of Mocha work fine with Factor, but there's some crazy shit going on in Puppet.
Still mocking, but
Yeah.
change the interface.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe that would be a great thing to attack.
But until that's fixed, please use that version, because otherwise we have lots of people who go onto the Google users list and they start freaking out. Why are all these tests failing? Is just have the right version of Mocha. So we can't go into a lot of detail on Ruby in just the 30 minutes. So this is just an example of some code. There's plenty of documentation online, so it's not hard to look stuff up and figure out how to use Ruby from there. I never took a course or anything. I just picked it up as I went along. So instead of going in depth into Ruby, we're going to look more into Factor code, because we think this is a great place to start working.
So if any of you guys saw James talk about the state of the community earlier today, some of this is going to sound familiar. Almost everything in this talk will apply to Puppet and Factor except this, because we'd really like to encourage you to get started with Factor for a lot of reasons. It's a much, much smaller code base. It's much easier to understand, which means that you can get started a lot faster and have a much easier time. Bugs and features will be a way more manageable scope. You'll be writing less code. You'll have to alter less files. You can get started faster, and we can review your code faster, and you're more likely to get your pull requests merged more quickly. And it's a great way to get started with Ruby without moving on to full-on Ruby. So for anyone who doesn't know what Factor is a tool used by Puppet to gather all the facts, or basically data about a node. You can run it independently, and it will just print out all of these fact names and their values. So this is an example of a really simple fact. I'm just going to walk you through some of the Factor DSL or domain-specific language really quickly, so you have a vague idea of what we're looking at. If you've written custom facts, this should be pretty familiar to you. So basically what you're going to do is say, I want to add the kernel fact. You're going to have a set code which will say, here's what you need to do in order to resolve this fact. So on Unix operating systems, oftentimes you'll have just some command line which will return the fact value that you're looking for. Another thing that you'll see a lot in the Factor DSL is these confine statements. So that's basically a way to take the value of another fact and say, only evaluate this fact this way if this condition is true. So here we're saying we only want to set code this way if we're running on Linux. So there are a lot of helpful resources for when you're programming, whether it's Ruby or Factor DSL or whatever you're working on. One of the best places to look is in the code base. Especially with Factor, you'll find a lot of things that are very similar to what you're trying to do, and it's a great way to follow good examples. Ruby Docs is a great place, I think Teska might have mentioned it, to look at all the Ruby API, get what you need, and IRB, which stands for Interactive Ruby Shell, is a way to basically use Ruby in real time. So you can enter in a snippet of Ruby code, and then it will tell you what that code will do. There's also lots of debuggers available for Ruby, which is great if you just can't figure out where the issue's coming from. And it's really important to know the helpful features of your text editor. So I discovered this summer that there is an intense religious war over text editors. So I'm not going to tell you which one to use, but I promise, having tried several this summer, that they all have helpful features that will make development a lot easier for you.
So another important part of contributing to Puppet and Factor is writing unit tests. And this can seem like the most intimidating part of the process because a lot of people aren't familiar with tests. They're really important for us for checking to make sure that everything that is going on in the code is working correctly. And so it's important to run them and to make sure that you haven't broken anything. But it's also important if you have written some new features to make sure that you have code that's going to cover those new features. So we want to have unit tests covering all of our code. This is an example with Rspec. The basic way that you're going to use unit tests is to kind of fake out the environment for what's going on and make sure that it's returning the right value. Since tests are pretty intimidating for a lot of people, we really want to be available as resources. So if you want to hop on IRC or on the Google user group, the Puppet Dev user group, and say, hey, I have no idea how to write these tests. Can someone help me? We're happy to give half an hour of our time to get you set up and figure out how to do this. But it's also, if you want to just look at the tests that already exist, these are for Factor. Factor ones especially, if you kind of go and look through them and see what the existing ones already do. If you've added in some support for a new operating system, you can see how the tests work for the other operating systems, and you should be able to figure out how to do it based on that. Running Rspec tests is pretty straightforward. In the top directory, you can run Rspec, and that'll run all of them. This is for Factor. It takes about 7 seconds. Puppet takes quite a bit longer. But you can also run just an individual one and format it nicely to show what's actually happening.
It's another good reason to start with Factor because it's so much easier to test. Like, you don't have to test all of Puppet for factors. Like, you just test Factor, and it goes by in 7 seconds.
It's nice. But you can also make it format nice in Nyancat, so that instead of watching 7 seconds of dots, you watch 7 seconds of rainbow Nyancat. Much nicer.
So there are a lot of resources you can access if Google's just not working out, RDoc's not helping. We're a pretty good resource, people at Puppet and other community members. So we've got the Puppet Dev IRC channel, which is great. There's tons of Puppet employees hanging out on there, as well as some other open source community members that have probably seen similar problems and can definitely help you out. And strongly recommend the Puppet Dev mailing list, which is a Google group. I was asked to let everyone know that we will absolutely respond to you on Puppet Dev, as it is strongly, strongly supported by our CEO. So if there is an email that's been lingering in Puppet Dev, then we'll have an angry Luke at our desk reminding us that we need to support the community. And that'll probably be seen by a lot more people than whatever you ask about in IRC, and you'll probably get a lot of pretty good detailed responses from people who can help you.
Cool, so you've been working on whatever ticket it is that you picked, and you want to submit it into the code base. So before you do that, you want to make sure that it's ready to commit, meaning I'm sure that you have those debug statements in your code that you meant to get rid of, but somehow you didn't because you forgot it was there, or it just looks like normal code. Please make sure that you're committing only what it is that you want to commit. And I'll go into some Git commands that you can do to avoid that. You'll also want to check for extra white space because white space can cause errors. It doesn't look nice, it's confusing. So to solve both of these issues, you'll want to do a git status, which what that does is it'll tell you which files it is that you edited and which ones will be committed, so you can check that you're not missing a file that you edited, or that you're not including a file that you didn't need to commit back into the code base. And then a git diff will go line by line and show you which lines it is that you changed and show you what you did to change it. So that, for me, helps me get rid of the most debug statements when I accidentally leave one or two of those in. If you do a git diff -- check, that'll do a whitespace check. So that's really helpful for avoiding stupid whitespace errors that are impossible to catch otherwise.
I know Haley had a great experience with whitespace at one point.
So going back to this text editor business, I came in as an Emacs user, and after much persuading, I switched to Vim. So after I switched, I edited my Vim settings to get everything set up the way I want, and showed whitespace error highlighting, and was terrified when I opened all of the documents I'd edited and found that there was just red everywhere. So make sure you keep an eye on that, because I actually had to have someone I worked with go through all of my files and fix all of my whitespace errors. So it's a bigger problem than you think.
Yeah, and then last, when you're ready to commit your code, you'll want to make sure that you write a good commit message. And we see lots of commit messages that are like, I fixed the bug, or something like that, where it doesn't help us any. We don't know what it is that you did. And we really want to merge in your code, so we really want to have an idea of what it is that you actually did with the code. So please, please write the first thing, include the ticket number and a brief message about it. And then you'll want to include a few things like what was happening before you made the changes, what the problem is, what your code does to fix the change, or to fix the bug, and then what happens now instead of that bug. So please include that. It really helps us make more sense out of your code and helps us merge it in faster. There's less email back and forth, and that's not fun. So please make the time to write a good commit message. And then you'll want to do a pull request, because once you've committed it back to your fork of the repository. And you'll want to merge your fork back into ours. So to do that, you'll click the button that says pull request. And this slide has an error in it. It's supposed to, we should have had a branch in our repository that was other than master. We should have had a good topic branch. So apologies for that. But you'll want to merge it back into the master branch of Puppet or Factor, unless you're solving a bug in somebody else's topic branch of Puppet or Factor. And if you only had one commit in your pull request, it'll automatically fill the request with whatever your commit message was. Otherwise, if you have multiple commits that you're trying to merge, please do a good overview of what it is that you're trying to merge in.
Do you have to do anything about, this is me coming from an SPN world, do you have to do anything about merging the most recent master into your feature branch before you do a pull request?
Rebasing?
Sometimes.
Yeah. So we'll have a resources page at the end of this with lots of links to how to do that kind of stuff in depth. But right, so if you've been working on your topic branch for a long time, chances are that someone's made changes to the branch that it's based off of, and you'll have to do a thing called rebasing, which is usually pretty painless, but just to make sure that you're all up to date on what's changed since you started.
A good thing to do is to make sure that you do a git pull every time, so that before you start working on the code, you pull the most recent changes so that it's a lot cleaner to merge in. Otherwise, I mean, we can merge it in, or take a look at it at least and try to merge it in, but there'll be a lot more email back and forth, like what it is that you changed. So if possible, before you start working on the code, do a git pull each time to just make sure you have the most recent version.
And in your feature branch, when you get pull master into your feature branch?
So I think you want to do a git pull before you make your topic branch.
Sure.
So that does a fetch and then a merge. If you've made your topic branch, you can go back to your master branch and do that as well, and then go to your topic branch and do a git rebase and rebase off of the master. And so what that does is it backs it up to the point where you started and plays all of the changes from the master branch on, and then puts your changes on top.
And so,
there is a lot of great Git resources out there. And we have a page, I think, that has a link to a ton of them.
Yeah, GitHub has a really good page for dealing with upstream repos.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always something that's interesting to get worked out. But we're also on IRC too, so if you have questions about a change that you made or making sure that you have the most recent version, people are always there to help out. So it's good to just ping someone on IRC.
Yeah.
Okay.
So another important thing is to commit in good increments. So that means don't make a ton of changes and then commit them all at once. The first thing I worked on was to add some facts in to factor. So I added the facts in and then realized, okay, we need to refactor this. And then we need to refactor it again. And then we need to add in support for AIX. And then we need to refactor it again. So we didn't just do all of that and then commit it and then submit a pull request. You should kind of figure out what your task is, do that, and then commit. And so you're committing in good increments so people can go back and see the history. And that makes it a lot easier for the people merging it in to kind of see what's going on here and to see kind of the evolution of what went on.
It also makes it a lot easier for you because I know this is something I have a hard time with. Like I just want to keep working on whatever it is I'm doing, and I don't want to stop and make commits. But after a while, it's like I do a git diff, and I just have this mass of code that I've added or deleted, and I just can't make sense of it anymore. I can't look through it like line by line to make sure I don't have debug statements, and it's a headache for me. So doing regular commits is a good thing for you and for us. So please get in the habit of doing that.
And one other thing that you can do with this is, for this pull request, I actually submitted the pull request and then said, hey, I'm not actually done with this. I still have some more changes to make, but I'd love for people to review it. And so that way you've got your pull request out there, you can get people to review it, and then before it's merged in, you still have more changes to make, and if they come back with any recommendations, you can make those changes as well. So that's a great thing to do, and we love to see people say, hey, please check this out, am I doing this okay?
Okay, so now you've submitted your pull request. What should you expect? So your pull request needs to be reviewed by someone on the Puppet Factor team before it can be merged in. As much as we love all the submissions we get and we really want to get all of them in, we get a lot. So make sure you're keeping an eye on your GitHub notifications because we'll probably be commenting, asking questions. We're probably not going to merge it in right away without verifying a couple things with you. So keep an eye, you'll probably get a comment within a week. If you don't, feel free to heckle us a little bit, hop on IRC, say, hey, why hasn't my pull request been looked at? Send an email and someone will take a look at it. And it's important to keep in mind that just because your code gets merged, it doesn't mean you're all the way done. We have another test suite that will kick off once your code is merged, and we might get in touch with you and say, hey, so still some problems that didn't come out in the Rspec testing, so just keep an eye on your GitHub notifications even after your code has been merged. So here's the kind of correspondence you can expect to see. This is me corresponding with a community member who didn't have tests for the code that they wrote, and I just let them know it'd be super cool if you could add some tests. I had a link to how to write tests. I gave them an example of a pretty similar test, and then they added a new commit with tests added, and I merged it in, and everything was awesome.
So it might happen that things do get messed up when your code is merged in. It will be okay. Things can be rewritten, go back to the, what before the merge happened, or you can submit a fix. This is where we get to make fun of Jeff Weiss, who's the Puppet Enterprise team lead as well as our mentor for this summer. And last week, yeah?
Yeah, last week, the week before,
or something like that. He submitted a pull request to GitHub to add some support for pull requests to their pull hooks. And submitted the pull request, and it got merged in, and then he broke all of the pull hooks for GitHub. So things may happen, but as you can see, it was fixed. And so if something does get messed up, it can be fixed, and it probably won't be as bad as what Jeff did.
But Jeff's great. We love Jeff.
Yeah. And also, disclaimer, he told us to make fun of him in his talk.
Yeah.
He encouraged us to make fun of him.
So, now that your code has been merged, you're officially a real contributor. Your code is out there and it's going to be used by real people, which is really exciting. If you've done something that a lot of other people wanted to see, and the chances that you have, you're going to be a real hero. And now it's time to celebrate. It's party time. You rock. Yay!
Yay, thank you.
Okay, so as we mentioned, we've started a resources page with lots of good links with more in-depth tutorials, because there's a lot of little details that we can't cover in this. That's the link right there if you want to jot it down. It's just links.puppetlabs.com, resources for new contributors. It's also a page on the wiki, so it's editable by anybody. So if you guys know of some good resources that you think would be helpful for other people, please feel free to add them, add comments, do whatever you want. It'd be really great if we could have this be like a good, well fleshed out active doc. And as soon as we figure out how to export this presentation into a PDF, we'll be putting it up there too, if there was some details from this presentation that you want to get to later.
So, thank you.